Reminder, find your center.
Well, welcome to the third installment of the webinar series, What If They Don't Want to Collaborate? Thank you for joining us through this. These sessions, it's been so enjoyable to get into conversations, not just here on Zoom, but also the emails that I've been getting and the interactions and the intersections that it's creating in different conversations and moments. And today is gonna really it's really the cherry on the cake with our guest. So um of course it's Judie Caribeaux as soon as this and today's topic is converting conflict into collective action, which is I believe is very instrumental for what is happening right now, but also uh, it gets down to the basic collaborations because we look at conflict as something very big, but it's also just the general asking of like, what did you mean by that? Or I know that this is coming up, so maybe I should say something before someone runs into a wall, like those types of things. So, and Judy Caribeaux is the Chief Collaboration Officer at Mission Plus Strategy. And we'll hear from her in just a moment. I want to give everyone, if you haven't watched, first, I want to give everyone a moment to check in this week. This week's checking question is, what is your special sauce to collaboration? Uh, I would say mine is the combination of my superpowers, listening and then seeing things that people are talking about, but they don't always necessarily see, and kind of like weaving it together. And because of those moments, I feel that I can contribute to a collaboration uh, to get it further towards the objectives. But please feel free to put in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share out loud. Ellen's good at creating relationships and being exceptionally curious. Ellen, also, I think your energy shows up at where everyone else's is when it's really high, and if it's not really high, you're able to pull it up. But I happen to know you, so that could be a little bit biased. Um, and Lauren, passion with the cause. Judy, do you want to add any to what your special sauce in collaboration is?
I think mine would be instead of making a statement, turn it into a question that really gets people thinking.
Hmm. Right.
The
Questions.
power of the question.
The right question can change everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yep.
love that. Maybe that's a future webinar series for you and me to host. Or Mission Plus Strategy, and I'll just be a guest on. So before we get into the conversation today, I just want to touch on some of the things that have come up in the last session. So we've talked about what collaboration is and what does it require and how does it get designed. So part of that is the five uh, building blocks of collaborative intelligence, which is transformational leadership, conflict resolution, facilitation, awareness of self, and friendliness to collaborate, which is also reverence. And if you're more curious about that, you can get a hold of me or you can watch the first session with Deborah Biddle, and we get into that a little bit more. But the big takeaway from that early session was collaborations require an invitation. Forced collaboration is not a thing. And again, that's a conversation we can have on the side that we did discuss in the first webinar. Um, we also went into a little bit in the second webinar. We talked a little bit how collaboration is a sacred act. What does it mean to be sacred? How do we work with people who don't see the sacredness in what we do? How do we illuminate that? How do we see that? For me, collaboration is what we are able to do. It's in us. It's an act of remembering how to collaborate and not necessarily learning how to collaborate. Our cells, our tissues, our organs all work together to collaborate to keep us going. And then that same thing is done throughout the planet in nature, and it's a constant beautiful collaboration. um, and so it's really important to ask, how is collaboration sacred to us? And so it's not necessarily because we've been collaborating since before the wheel was created and fire was harnessed, but it is us. So just some things to think about. And then you, an actor in collaboration, are sacred. So coming to that self-awareness of understanding of like, oh, I'm a sacred act. I showing up in a space to commit to working with other people is sacred. So what does that do to the work? And what if everyone knew that they were sacred? So just some things to think about as we went into the second session. And then some of the highlights of the sessions were um, bringing people together and honoring humanity, creating a space where everyone feels whole and seen, patience for when people can join in the collaboration. Sometimes it takes time to realize why they need to be in, why they are the right collaborator to be involved, or why their heart is in the mission, or how they align to the work. It is a process to collaborate inside us, but then also to collaborate with other people. Um, Building community with our shared visions for the future was a big topic of Rebecca's conversation last week. The process takes time. I heard something beautiful after I was talking with Rebecca, but we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And so this conversation with looking at Rebecca's genius in strategic foresight really it was helpful to look at how do we get behind, engage in a shared future. So those are some of the things. Judie, I'm going to actually ask if anything's coming in mind from you from the past two sessions, because I think you were in both of them.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I really appreciate both Deborah and Rebecca's perspectives and their expertise that they shared. A couple of things I think just to add to what you were saying, Gregg, is that, I think um, collaboration is sacred in part because it requires relationships for collaborations to even exist, right? And it's that thing that is in between people, which is the relationship, and honoring that makes this work sacred or an act of stewardship. Not only because in most instances in my world it's around nonprofits, but it's also because you need to steward the relationship as well. And so that to me is what makes all of this sacred. And then I think the other thing that it just kind of, what's bubbling up for me is this idea that collaboration requires us to be open to change in, our way of thinking, change in who we are as people, change in our external environment. And I think that also can contribute to the sacredness because change, and us changing is a very vulnerable position to be in.
Oh, the importance of vulnerability and being comfortable with uncomfortable, and also the question of when do we live in more of a constant uncomfortable, because that's actually what it is.
Yeah.
Living is always a state of uncomfortability. Uh, anyway, that's a whole different, we could go down that road, but I love those points. Thank you so much, Judie. And this all brings down to how this conversation started. So what if they don't want to collaborate? And this is coming from the perspective that we've invited them to collaborate, but they're saying no. But also it can be amended to the other parts and other times that we see constantly of where we don't even get close to collaborating because we have different viewpoints, or we don't understand the mission the same, whatever it is. But the simple answer is you don't have to.
Mhm.
We can still get to the objectives of the collaboration without people. Even if we thought that they were the one piece that was going to make this happen, we'll still get it done. The big key, though, is we must leave the invitation open. If we close the invitation, it is going to build a wall. And then once that wall is built, we're going to spend more energy trying to get that wall down and recreate relationships and establish not just the relationship with that co-collaborator, but everyone else that we've been collaborating. And it's going to be a lot more work and slow us down a lot more than we ever anticipated. So you don't have to collaborate, but please leave the invitation open. And this is just one way to look at it. I'm a student of collaboration. I happen to know a lot. I've happened to center my life around it, and I don't know everything. So I will never come in to any room thinking that I know everything. This is just a suggestion. I'm going to stop yammering now, though, and I'm going to welcome the brilliant Judie Caribeaux. I know she's mentioned, she spoke for a moment, but I want to say a little bit about her work. She's a licensed clinical social worker with 30 plus years of leadership experience in nonprofits, universities, and municipalities. Her education is a master's in arts and communication from Northern Illinois University and a master of social work from Aurora University. She's led a successful merger at a domestic violence agency, expanding services for survivors. You've done a lot of mergers, so it's interesting that this is the one that's highlighted in the bullet points. She's done so much work. She's an expertise in strategic planning, executive team development, public-private partnerships, and nonprofit executive coaching. She's done so much that has brought her to one of the first chief collaboration officer positions in the country. And Judie and I have talked a lot about this, how we will see chief people officers, chief development officers. We will see a lot of these positions in C-suites turning to chief collaboration officers. So welcome, Judie. I'm so happy and honored to spend this time with you. Thank you. What else would you like to add to this that's not said?
All good on the background. All good.
Okay.
A lot
What do you
of,
want? Is
yeah.
there anything that when you talk about your biography, that because it's always so professional labeled, we miss something out on? Like, is there something in there that, because you're a mother, you're a wife, you are a steward of the land, you are a traveler.
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. It's always been like, what have you accomplished, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I think this idea of collaboration is, much like you, Greg. You say that you're a student of collaboration, and it is just a part of how you approach the world. And I think the same thing for me is this kind of sense of collaboration is how I approach the world, in part because I think it creates the sense of belonging for people who want to accept the invitation. And to me, belonging is just such a critical, unmet need for so many people. And belonging, through belonging, we can accomplish so much more together, particularly if if the belonging also has a goal orientation level to it. So that I think was kind of a non-answer answer for you, Greg. But
I
I would
loved
say,
it. And I was just writing through belonging, we can accomplish so much more together. You
yeah,
know, and that has me thinking about belonging as a synonym for collaboration.
yeah,
It doesn't fit for everything, but in ways of building the collaborative team, what if we call it a belonging
yeah, yeah.
as a
Well,
noun?
and the thing that I also want to add to this too, and again, I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and you and I can do this really easily. So you're going to have to like restrain me here a little bit, Greg. But the rabbit hole is so one thing I did over the weekend is it was the 30th anniversary of the showing of the movie To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. So I went to a screening of that at the Music Box Theater in Chicago last night. And the idea of belonging and collaboration was really in that movie. And it was about defending three people and who they fundamentally were, and this community coming together, collaborating to be able to defend these three people. And it got me thinking that collaboration in our society, in our culture, and particularly today, is really a form of resistance in a world that is very much competition oriented. Collaboration really is a form of resistance. And so I would be curious to know, I'm going to put you on the spot, Greg, and we'll go down this rabbit hole just a little bit. But how do you think about this notion that collaboration is a form of, or can be a form of resistance.
Well, I live that. So to me, every
Yes.
collaboration is a way to redefine systems.
Yes.
And, and if it doesn't, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if it feels so unrelated, it is aligning because we're starting here with self-worth and self-awareness. And anytime we're building to self-actualization, that is a form of resistance because we're
Mhm.
really understanding who we are and how we show up in this meat sack while also getting better with what our energy, what our godliness inside us is. And then with that, alongside friendliness to collaborate, or reverence, which is another building block to collaborative intelligence, we then start seeing that godliness in our co-collaborators and we start showing up in a different way to do this aligned vision. So yeah, I'm right there. And then
Beautiful.
the fact that everyone watching and listening, Judie wouldn't tell me what she did this weekend, and it was because of that. And Tu Wong Fu is one of my favorite movies, and I did
Mine
not
too.
realize that it is that. So Red and Wild, that is our theme.
Yes, red and wild.
Oh my gosh, I love that little rabbit hole. We're gonna probably come back to it, I imagine, in this conversation. But Judie, let's start with just a couple starter questions. As some of you might know, with the International Institute on Collaboration, with all of our clients and all our partnerships, we start with the basic definition of collaboration, when two or more actors work together to accomplish a common goal. And then from that simple definition, we allow people, clients, partnerships to evolve it into what it means specifically for them. So, Judie, how do you define collaboration? And then what do you initially do when if a collaborator doesn't want to collaborate?
Yeah. So I define collaboration, and I think you and I will end up in the same space about collaboration, but I might use the words differently. So I see collaboration as intentional. And I know, Gregg, you define it as, or can define it as, it also can be unintentional. But the intentionality is around, I'm going to intentionally be in relationship with you for whatever duration that is. It could be moments or it could be much longer than that, in order to be able to accomplish something together that I cannot do alone. So it's goal oriented, it's intentional. We're coming together for a shared purpose. There's an openness to differences. And I think that kind of goes into the second question, and I'll circle back in just a minute to that. But it is being open to differences, differences of opinion, differences in approach, differences in worldviews. And it's again opening yourself up to be willing to change others and to be changed. And collaboration requires trust. And in order to have trust, you have to have authenticity and transparency. So it's a little bit about defining collaboration, but also the characteristics required, in my mind, for collaboration. Um, the what do you do if somebody doesn't want to collaborate? My initial response is tell me more. Um, And that was really hard for me to play a hard place for me to get to. And I think, for me, becoming a licensed clinical social worker made me a much better leader, a much better participant in collaboration, a much better person, because the questions that I would be asking clinical clients would be the same questions I would ask myself. And so let me just kind of take a step back here for a minute and just say that I think it's immensely ironic that you asked me to talk about this particular topic about conflict and collaboration, because I am a person who really gets anxious, does not like anything that is smells and feels like conflict, anything that might also be rejection. And all of that comes with, for any of us, from our family of origins. We learn how to be in relationships professionally and personally from our families of origin. And so my family of origin was you keep the peace. And it was expected, particularly of the girls in the family, to be the people pleasers. And so for me, conflict was something to avoid, not to actively engage in. And so I really had to spend a good portion of my adult life and, continuing from now on in how do I have a better relationship with conflict and really see conflict as healthy and unhealthy. Not that all conflict is unhealthy, which is what I grew up with, but that there is healthy and unhealthy conflict. But for me, that was a bit of a rabbit hole, but to just blatantly answer your question, for me, it's around getting to this place of being curious and asking somebody, tell me more about that. That's really how I start. When somebody responds, they're not interested in it.
I love that because you and I have similar feelings with this. Like, it's when someone doesn't want to or is not interested, it's immediately like my curiosity gets sparked and like, okay, like what is it? This is most likely a you thing, not a me thing. So let's figure out this. Like, what piece of information are you missing that you don't see what we're doing? Uh,
And it could also be, what piece of information am I missing? Is there
mhm.
something that you're seeing about this collaboration that I'm blinded to because I'm so much about collaboration that really could be problematic? And how do I then address whatever that is? So to me, that's always the 2% truth. Whenever you've got somebody who is responding like, not negative, what's the word I'm looking for? They're responding more in a dissenting opinion. I've got to be open to what that is. But I will tell you, that wasn't always my first reaction. My first reaction would have been, many years ago, to be defensive and to be able to tell you all the reasons why I think this is a good idea, versus now my reaction is, I want to know more. I want to understand. It's that old quote of, I think it was by Eleanor Roosevelt, first understand before you're understood.
Right. And I love the reminder though that there are younger versions of us inside that are still like, well, I don't want to. And fine, slam the door,
Totally.
like and walk away.
That's right. Kind of like
Uh,
this.
I love that we've developed though, Judy. So thank you. And I celebrate all the development with everyone watching. Um, I want to backtrack quickly just to one thing that you mentioned, so watchers, viewers can understand. With the Institute, we separate into intentional and unintentional collaborations. Intentional collaborations are ones that we name a collaboration that we intentionally are going into as collaboration. Unintentional collaborations are moments where we would never really call a collaboration, like a dinner party or having to push a car if you run out or the grocery store checkout line. But the beautiful thing why we identify them is because they have so many lessons to teach us in collaboration because they're full of positive deviance that we're collaborating properly in a beautiful way every day. And so if we can bring those positive deviants into our intentional collaborations, it helps us along. So a little aside, we're here for Judy. We're here for Judy. So let's get into
We're
another
here for
question.
us. We're here for the
Yeah.
relationship.
Uh, what practices and tools do you use to align self-awareness, skills, and superpowers to mission, and to bring people back to the mission?
I think that, and I think you're aligning the self-awareness in that question is really an important kind of domain that I don't think we think a lot about, that collaboration does require us to be self-aware. And it requires us to be self-aware because, again, we're in this relationship and we need to know what are we contributing to this relationship that's really helpful and positive in the relationship. And then what are we contributing that might be detrimental or influence negatively the relationship or break down any kind of trust. And so for me, I really worked hard at my self-awareness when I became the leader of a domestic violence agency, where we ultimately, and you referenced it in my bio, where we merged with our number one referral source. And I really needed to become a different kind of leader and really challenge myself to step up and be right with potential conflict and right with collaboration. And really, it's about being okay with letting go of a lot of control and having shared leadership and shared decision making within an organization, and yet still be able to keep it moving forward. And so for me, it was around, I was doing a whole bunch of self-awareness assessments. I did stumble upon the University of Pennsylvania recently. They have a great website where they've got a whole bunch of assessments that are free, that you can take, and it gives you all the scoring, and it just kind of helps you see different sides of who you are that you might be blinded to, or that they're hidden from you, that you need to now bring into view and really kind of go, why am I like this? And what is this contributing to who I am, both on my sides that I like to claim because those are my, superpowers, but there's also shadows to all superpowers. And so what do I need to do about that shadow side? So anyways, University of Pennsylvania, great resource for these assessments. Gregg, I know you do an assessment that we love on collaboration and collaborative leadership styles and skills and characteristics. So I think doing those assessments is really important. But there's one thing to do it by yourself and look at it, but it's also another thing to do it with people who are your mentors, or an executive coach, if you're lucky enough to have an executive coach. If you don't, having people who are mentors in your life are really important. The people who love and care about you enough to really be able to tell you in very caring and compassionate ways, but tell you honestly about the things that are helping you, but the things that are kind of your obstacles that you're putting in the way of your own success and your own development. So I think doing these assessments in relationship with someone else really gives another dimension to it, for you to be able to really see who you are and what you're bringing to the table. The other thing I think too is just reading. I think that was a point in time in my life where I just was a voracious reader and really made time for reading books like Crucial Conversations. That's the one I go back to often, that really changed my perspective on conflict and really helped me see conflict as this continuum of, um, it was more of a continuum where you've got healthy on one side and unhealthy on the other side, and how you move on that continuum. So I think reading and really reflecting on that reading is a really important way to, again, introduce tools for you to be kind of more aligned around collaboration and entering into this work whole and ready to change. And there's a whole list of books that I have that I'm happy to share with you, Gregg, that we often share with clients, that are just good go-to books, easy to read, but really challenge how we think about how we show up. 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is another one that I used and really found very valuable. And then, like I said before, it's like the mentor piece, right? I think it can't be said enough to have, or understated, to be able to have your own like board of directors for you personally, the people who are going to invest in you and help you become a better person. And you can meet with them collectively, individually. I've even asked people to say, to email me when I'm doing this kind of self-reflective activity, or do a self-reflective assessment. I even ask them to go, okay, so what are some things that you would say I don't know about myself that are strengths, but what would you say about me are things that get in my way that I need to know about? And just send out an email to my board of directors, and I mean that as my board of mentors, and get their feedback and response. So there's a variety of things you can do that are low cost or no cost to be able to really challenge your own awareness of who you are and who you want to become.
I want to sit here for an additional moment with two thoughts. So the first is Well, the assessment that we do at the Institute, Judy did help create, and it was from the question of to for the best possible, most impactful collaborations, we need trust to build trust in community, and then we have to keep it. So that's how the 5 building blocks really came about. But this piece that you were saying about self-awareness, and I want to look at specifically as a valuable conflict resolution tool. I learned my conflict resolution skills from Bob and Alice Evans, and I had Bob's voice in my head just now, being like, "Well, conflict's a way of living, and is that the way you want to live? Like, do you want to stay in conflict or do you want to get out of it?" And so, in with self-awareness, like if the more self-awareness and the more we do with our work, the less possible it is that we're going to get into a conflict without seeing it ahead of time and working with it when all these self-aware people are together. And then the other piece of that is, as you were talking, Judy, on this is still the first prong that I'm going to ask about, is the value of having a group that's always
Mhm.
constantly openly talking about it. So
Yes.
you've like not demeaned, you've softened any conflict that will come up because you already have a relationship of talking about the hard stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Please add on to that if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to, something that you shared with me. I forget when this was, but it was a really great reframe of safe space versus brave space, right? And remind me who the author is, because I think it's really important for that to get credited to the right person.
My brain just stopped what her name is.
Is it like
Uh,
Aroha?
yes. Oh my gosh. It will be in the email. I'll make
Yeah.
sure that it's
I
credited to
just
you.
I think it's a really important shift, right? Because, I've been in organizations where people are so focused on creating a safe space, right? Where conflict and where you're safe to be able to, where you feel comfortable to say something. And this is not about comfort, right? And I think this is where having people around you is so important is it's easy for me to stay in a place of comfort that feels good. I don't want to I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel uncomfortable. But that's not where growth happens. Growth happens when we go into these places of being uncomfortable and really being brave to look at yourself, right? And go, yep, that's me. I don't like that, but that's me, or I want to change that. Um, and and being okay about that. And it's also being in that space of calling other people in to face things that are uncomfortable and scary to face. And how can you do that together, right? And so I think there's this overlap of the brave space, which is going outside your comfort zone, right? And safe spaces, I've got to stay in my comfort zone at all costs. And brave spaces around, you're still respected, there still is this sense of compassion and care in this space, and yet we're able to talk about the difficult things. Again, my favorite quote, and I've shared this with you before, Gregg, and it's from Fred Rogers, is if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And that means the difficult things have got to be mentionable if we're going to be able to manage it collectively.
Oh, I love that so much. And I just want to going back to Brave Spaces. I cannot remember her name, but it is in an essay that is in Holding Change by Adrienne Marie Brown. So
Yes,
we use
good
that
book.
book as our facilitation book in the life cycle of collaboration at the Institute. So, okay, going to my second prong of this is what are some ways, once we're having mentors and we know our self-assessments and we're using all those tools, what are ways or mechanisms that we can put in place to like pull them out at the moments we exactly need them? Like, Judy, remember you said this 2 days ago in our session. Like, what are the mechanisms or what are the practices to ensure that it's not just said in the meetings, but it's said in the actual, like, in the doing of the collaboration?
Yeah. So I rely often on this tool. I've now been able to reframe it using this organizational relationship system coaching method much better than I did earlier in my career. I used to call it rules of engagement, but somebody once said that sounded like we're at war, and that's very true, right? So or this organizational relationship system coaching says it's how do you want to be together? How do you want to be together? And then how do you want to be together in conflict? And I used that early on in my career under a different term, but use it consistently with clients where we will actually talk about this. How are we going to show up for one another right now when we're working on this project? How are we going to show up with one another? Or if we're going to be in this relationship, how are we going to show up with one another? I did that a lot with the boards that I worked with when I was executive director or in that role. And then I would be able to come back and go, remember when we talked about this? I didn't live up to that, and I'm really sorry about that. And I just want to call that out. Or it'll be, remember when we talked about this? Here are the observable things I see happening where you're not living into this. Can we talk about this? And so it's how do we want to be together? And then how do we want to be together in times of conflict? And it's going back to that. It's not just setting those relational expectations and then never talking about it again. It's keeping those list of expectations alive and referring back to them. And if we're able to have those conversations, what happens is it really deepens trust. And it's based on this belief that relationships can handle conflict and that actually if we're respecting one another, if we really have respect for one another, we're going to be able to say these things to each other, knowing that it's set out of a great deal of care and compassion because we want the relationship to be together. We want the collaboration to actually sustain. Did that answer your question?
Completely, and it just amplified friendliness to collaboration as a building block, or reverence, having reverence for your
Yes.
co-collaborators.
Yep.
I always think about the one of the most difficult group projects I've ever had in any schooling. That was while I was at the Clinton School of Public Service, our first practicum project for that entire year, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And we'd had one co-collaborator that we'd go to sleep and wake up and there'd be a million changes and it would get
Yes.
so angry at her. And if she didn't do those things, we would not have had the best product possible
Yeah.
to present to the bar and
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, um,
Yep.
I'm gonna move on to our final question.
Yeah.
Oh, well, at least my final prepared question. Can you speak to naming it when there is conflict? And you kind of touched on this on the Fred Rogers quote.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think this goes back to the brave space, right? Like, I think this is, we are uncomfortable when we have to name the proverbial elephant in the room, the very thing that nobody else wants to talk about, but we know it's there and it's keeping us from collaboration, right? So maybe it's somebody who is like making these changes, right? And it was not necessarily their role and it was actually undermining the group. How do you name that either to the person directly one-on-one or if the conditions are right in front of the whole group, right, to be able to talk about it. So it is having the courage to be uncomfortable and to feel that nervousness and that anxiety inside, but still do it anyways. And not in a way that is blaming. Like you can hear it in the tone of voice, you can see the nonverbals when it's like, why are you doing this? And you did that. That's blaming versus inviting somebody into, let's talk about this and what's the impact this is having on the entire group. And the best way to do that is somewhere in this relationship, be the first person to call in yourself on the difficult things, the elephant in the room when you're contributing to the elephant in the room. And it goes back to the whole self-awareness thing. You've got to be self-aware when you're contributing to the elephant, feeding the elephant versus helping that elephant move on or disappear in the room. So when you're able to call yourself out first, that's always very helpful in setting this kind of tone of it's okay to have these difficult conversations together. But I think part of this is how do you have your own courage to be able to name the things in the room. Excuse me. And again, the sooner those get addressed, everybody feels relieved because somebody had the courage to name it. And if you're able to resolve this in a way that is caring and compassionate, you are able to then really add to and enhance the relationship and build the foundation of trust for the relationship. Because what you're saying by doing this is, look, we can navigate through these things, these difficult things collectively and come out on the other side better.
Well, and going back to the topic of this web series, uh, sometimes a collaborator just needs it to be named. This goes
Yes.
back to what you were saying earlier with the like asking more questions when they don't want to or they're not interested. And sometimes the what we find out is that they just don't know what it is,
Right.
and the uncomfortability of being able to actually ask it isn't the courage isn't there. So us bringing them in and naming it. So
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good point that you make, Gregg, is that sometimes people don't have their words, right? And I think I've said that often in other kinds of contexts is I just need to be able to get my words to explain what I'm experiencing and feeling, right? And sometimes being able to say, I think this is what is going on. How does that fit for everybody? Everybody else is either going to go, yeah, that makes sense, or no, it's more like this for me. And again, people are starting to get their words to be able to explain what that experience is like. And that in and of itself can provide such relief for the group.
completely. Oh, uh, that yes. I had another thought in there, but it's gone. It
That's
left.
okay.
So we're just gonna let it go. But I do want to open it up for one question. If anyone watching has a question that that you wouldn't mind, that would be valuable for other people to listen to be on the recording. If not, we'll close out and then we will invite any questions off the what's the word I'm looking for? Off the yeah. I was looking for the journalistic term, but it left my brain as well. So, any questions? Well, Judie, there is one, I believe. No questions, but appreciate the reflections on conflict and relationships. Thank you so much. Judie, this has been such a pleasure to have you close out
Always
this webinar
fun.
series. You're one of
Always
my
fun being
favorite
in conversation with you.
You're one of my favorite thought partners ever in life. If you want to get a hold of Judie or Mission Plus Strategy, here are some ways. And then I will send an email out once we get this uploaded to YouTube with all of the links to every of the sessions, all of the speakers' information, and anything else that might be helpful in this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a joy. Always a
And
joy.
everyone
And I
have a
always walk out with some new kind of perspective.
same. Oh my gosh. Well, have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.